Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. CMC connects people and ideas through community conversations at forums just like this one nearly every week. I'm Ellen Block. I'm both an independent international tax consultant and proud member of the CMC Board of Trustees. I'm also the CMC's treasurer and chair of its finance committee, because that's where they hide the accountants. For those of you joining us by live stream, we're coming to you from, is this the Vue Columbus? Sorry, in the Brewery District. Welcome, everyone. If you scan the QR codes on your tables, you can learn more about today's forum, take a short survey, and see many organizations that support your not-for-profit Columbus Metropolitan Club. Thank you to today's forum sponsor, The Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. We're also grateful to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch, and our host, Vue Columbus. Yes, every CMC forum takes a village. Let's thank everyone for supporting today's program. Could fresh thinking about philanthropy help save the lives of mothers and babies in Central Ohio? Welcome to today's forum, Outdated Funding, Lost Lives, Why Ohio Babies and Birthing Parents Deserve Better. Today we'll explore how participatory grant-making, trust-based philanthropy, and low-barrier funding promise to improve the lives of Central Ohio's mothers and babies. Please help me welcome today's distinguished panel. E.C. Green, President of Physicians CareConnection, Kelley Griesmer, President and CEO of the Women's Fund of Central Ohio, Jill Miller, President and CEO of Cincinnati's Bethesda, Inc. and BI3, Danielle Tong, Executive Director of CelebrateOne, and our host returning once again to CMC, Jennifer Bullock, weekday anchor for NBC4. Jennifer, welcome back. We look forward to today's conversation.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be a part of this really important conversation. I am here today. Yes, I was asked to be here, but I was asked by my good friend, Danielle Tong with CelebrateOne. Not only am I an anchor here with NBC4, but I am also the vice president of Miles's Mission, which is a nonprofit started after my son was stillborn, almost 3 years ago exactly in 2021. So for me, really enhancing that awareness, but also providing resources, supporting families who experience pregnancy and infant loss has become a sole purpose for me. And when I was asked to do this panel, obviously with the nonprofit, I knew a little bit about fundraising. My dad is the president, so he handles a lot of the dirty work, and I get to be the face of everything. But that's what you do when you have organizations like this, right? You got to keep the lights on, and you need the funds to keep serving those families. But there were some things about the process of fundraising that never really sat right with me. It's really getting in the way sometimes of the work that we are trying to do. And so today we're going to learn more about the current methods of funding and why they may not be as effective in moving the needle when it comes to infant maternal health outcomes as we need them to be. There is always a better way to do things. But before we get started, I do kind of just want to get a lay of the land. So we are going to start with Danielle Tong. Could you give us a brief update on the affairs of infant maternal health here in Central Ohio?
Certainly. So I will say that last year in 2023, we lost 122 babies. And in our line of work, we generally say that that is 6 kindergarten classrooms that will not get to experience the milestones that we all want our children to experience. That's meaningful all by itself for those families, but it also has further meaning to us as community members, because we know that infant mortality is a canary in a coal mine for the overall community health. So it helps us understand how our neighbors are doing. If you want to know how your neighbors are doing, all you have to do is look at our babies. And we know that all of our babies are not doing well. There is a big disparity in infant maternal health. We know that 3 times the number of black babies die than white babies. So we already know that our black neighbors are not doing as well as they could be. And that really allows us to set the stage for this conversation around how do we get to improvement and how do we get to better.
And so let's go ahead and talk about that. When you think about charitable giving or philanthropy, when it comes to fighting infant and maternal mortality, you don't really make that connection, right? Often people think of doctors or hospitals. So what is the connection between philanthropy, funding, and improving maternal and infant health? And EC, I kind of want to start with you when it comes to that. I mean, tell us a little bit about your service with Physicians CareConnection and what it's like to keep your work funded in order to improve those outcomes.
Sure. So Physicians CareConnection has been in the community since about 1993. Our mission is to help people who are vulnerable really optimize their health. And what that means is that we provide access and also problem-solving skills for people who need medical services and also social supports. For a long time in this community, we've had a partnership with CelebrateOne and other lead entities to impact the infant mortality for Black mothers in this community. We worked on a project together called Step 1 for a Healthy Pregnancy. And what that project was to do, or program, was to connect mothers, make it easy for them to connect to prenatal services and other supports. That's important because access is a huge issue. Just because you have insurance doesn't mean that the doctor that you pick up to call can take your insurance. And if you don't have insurance, then that is an even bigger issue. Compacted with that are the social conditions that people experience. So I can get a doctor's appointment, but I cannot get a ride there. Or maybe I'm eligible for Medicaid or some other insurance, but I need assistance in how to navigate that paperwork. So there are many barriers to people accessing services and understanding where they can get those. So what we do is we problem solve for each individual. Each individual is different. Their needs are different. When we're talking about pregnant or birthing mothers, they have a birthing history. And so based on that, you start to make decisions about when and how they can be connected to those services. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not one call. It's not two calls. And as we're connecting them to different providers, each provider has their own guidelines and policies. And so it's educating those mothers on how to access those resources, but also giving them the tools that they need to kind of navigate the community.
And so that's here in Central Ohio specifically.
Yes.
But Jill, in Cincinnati, you're doing a lot of the same work, but the numbers prove that it's in fact working. I mean, Cincinnati boasts an infant mortality rate that's below the national average, when statewide, that's not the case. So just tell me a little bit about how you're approaching funding BI3 is when it comes to that philanthropy and how that contributes to those numbers.
Yes, so I will start off by saying that it has been a journey. So I consider infant mortality a wicked problem. A wicked problem has many tentacles, complex, many factors that are ever changing, and almost impossible to solve. So wicked problems take time, and from a funder's perspective, you have to be patient. You have to have clear expectations of what this change is going to look like. You're not maybe going to see the needle move for 2 or 3 years, but over time, you should see a trend where infant mortality rates starts to go down. So I love talking about infant mortality because I believe every baby deserves a healthy start to life, and every child deserves a fair and just opportunity to achieve their best health. And that is our mission statement. Health equity is our vision statement. And our mission statement, we just changed to reflect our commitment to trust-based philanthropy, which is BI3 is advancing health equity and fueling innovation by investing in trust-based partnerships. And for those who have never heard of trust-based philanthropy, it's an approach to grant making that is grounded in transparency, mutual accountability, and learning. Conventional philanthropy, I compare it to very transactional. It's very one-sided, holding grantees' feet to the fire. We sit in our ivory towers and create applications that take hours for nonprofits to create. And then we make decisions in our little office and who should get funding and who should not get funding. And then after we award the grant, we set up all these reporting requirements. So grantees are spending hours filling out reports that maybe nobody will read, maybe one person, and we file it and we check the box. And they could be doing their mission-driven work. And so trust-based philanthropy recognizes and is flipping the script. We want to build relations with our grantees, relational partnerships with our grantees. We are grounded in mutual accountability. You do what you say you're going to do, and we're going to do what we say we're going to do. We're going to show up for you. It's not just about cutting a check. It's about moving beyond the check. How do we support you in every way? And, you know, when people talk about trust, building trust is more than accountability. Accountability means that you say what you're going to do. You're dependable. Trust is really developed when you have similar values and beliefs. And BI3 and Cradle Cincinnati both value life. We believe one preventable death is one too many. And we also believe that every child deserves to live to see their first birthday. And so vast different people with different perspectives can all come together around an issue if they share values and they share a belief. And that is what trust-based philanthropy is all about. It's trusting our partners. It's leaning in. It's being flexible with the dollars. It's awarding a grant to Cradle Cincinnati for 3 years, and 6 months in, they say, hey, we need to build community for Black women. There are Black women who don't feel supported in their community. They don't have somebody to call so they can go on a 2-job interview to watch their baby. And we need to build this support system. We don't know what it's going to look like, and we're not sure what the outcomes are going to be, but we need to do this. And I said, yes, let's do it. No application, no overcomplications. This is what Black women need. Let's do it. And it's just being more responsive and leaning in and working together towards a common cause.
And so let's talk a little bit more specifically about that funding and maybe some of the obstacles when it comes to that process. We've talked about the fact that there's mission-based, there's community-based, there's participatory grant making as well. I know that's something, Kelley, that you're very familiar with, but also those issues when it comes to general operating costs that can really create barriers for these organizations in order to fund and reduce these numbers, right?
Which one? I don't know. Do you want, yeah, that's, as a women's fund, we sit in a very odd place because we're a public foundation, which means we fundraise for ourselves from the masses to try to make those funds pool so that we can invest in a trust-based way, the way BI3 does, and we've learned so much from them. So we very much believe in the trust-based piece. And then we add participatory, which we've done since the beginning. We're about 25 years old. Participatory, almost 25. We're going to have that celebration soon. But participatory was our first step toward trust, which means that we understood as a women's fund, even as a very small organization, that whoever was on our board, whoever founded our organization, even the people who are donating, to her point, every single person is different. Every organization is different. There is no way my lived experience as Kelley Griesmer would help me know exactly who to fund. I need to ask more people. And so over the years, we have brought the entire community. We put out a call. This year, we have over 300 people registered to come to the library in about 2 weeks. Each of them has a set of our grants. They review them, they score them, and they give us their thoughts on what's going to create the most social change for women and girls. Every single group that has a grant in front of it that's aimed at girls has a girl in that group. People of color, people of different identities have to be in these groups to advise. Now, I still have a fiduciary duty to our donors and to everyone to make sure the grants that go out, we do have accountable partners and we do have people who are partnering with us. But that said, we have over the years also shortened that application. We have told the grant readers who we depend on so much, don't ask about their budget. That's none of your business. Your job is to review the grant and tell us if you think it's going to create social change. So we have tried to blend that participatory part, because I'll be honest, even as participants, it doesn't mean we trust. So we have to teach everyone in the room that you need to think about that they've put in this application because they're experts in what they're trying to do. Don't worry about if they tell you they need to spend $5 on folders and you're like, well, I would just staple it. Not your job. Your job, though, is to say once they get that folder out to these women and girls, it's going to change their world. So we kind of try to combine that participatory is really a step toward equitable design, because you design with the grant readers what your social change picture is going to look like for the next year, and you build that trust in at the same time. And so participatory and trust-based, I think, have to sit together for our work. And the trust-based is the part we've still been working toward, but the participatory part is been extremely successful over the years in being able to get grants out to people that otherwise wouldn't have had that funding experience so early in their trajectory.
I like that a lot. And what I will say is that you're sharing power. Participatory grant making shares power with those who are closest to the problems.
Yeah, we hope. And with that in mind, though, I mean, you mentioned early on in their trajectory, right? So sometimes there are these small organizations. I know very well personally about that. When you're just trying to get your feet on the ground, you're just trying to get that initial support. Can you talk a little bit about funding those smaller organizations very early on? You mentioned we don't need to worry about what their budget is, but what are they going to do with this money? How does that differ from funding these larger and more established organizations?
Well, it differs and it doesn't. Because I'll be honest, as a 24-year-old organization that's given out over $5 million in grants, I'm going to get as much pushback from somebody because of why I fund and how I fund. So I think that's actually our biggest challenge. But I will say for small organizations, and I don't want this to come out wrong, and I thank every single person in this room of every identity, but philanthropy is patriarchal. It is based upon white men's experiences with other white men. White men talk to other white men, and when that guy has a good idea, they give him money, and they give him trust, and they give him a chance. The world has not done that for women and girls, and certainly not mothers and babies. And so we are trying to mirror that. And unfortunately, the gender norms in our communities have taught us, don't trust women to do anything with money. And quite frankly, all of the data shows that they will do more with it when given that money. They will pay back their loans faster. Their businesses will stay in business. They will find benefits for their employees. That's not to say that a lot of men and people identify as male don't do that, but women are doing it at very high clips and not getting any credit for it. So we specifically focus on those organizations especially, because I think if you look at the data, I mean, it shows that organizations started by women of color. There's a report called Pocket Change, Why Women of Color Do More with Less, and it was authored by the Ms. Foundation, one of our sister organizations, and what they will tell you is that most women of color running very important programs in this community, they're not even making a salary yet. because their board has told them they can't spend the money they're raising even to have a living wage. So the Women's Fund, one of the first things we'll do is say, do you need somebody to be paid? Great. You know, do you need a room to meet in? Great. Because honestly, that's what men have become very good at doing for each other, and so we need to do that. And even, you know, and again, if there are men who people identify as male who aren't getting that funding out there, they deserve it too. I believe all gender norms are toxic, but I believe it's especially important for us to show that trust and fund new organizations, new ideas, because it's so hard for women to get that first few checks in the door.
And so let's bring that into how that directly affects these outcomes. Danielle, I know you know the numbers very well. So how are we able to kind of have this conversation about that funding and what that means for reducing infant and maternal mortality?
So I will start with wanting to put a fine point, as though it were necessary, because you did an amazing job, on what you've heard so far, is that the goal here is to be listening and to then be implementing. And that is really what both of these folks have said to us so far, is that the most effective funding is first listening and then implementing based on what you heard. So how does this relate to infant maternal health? So we know in infant mortality, actually, I will tell you, I didn't realize this. This is something that I learned coming into this work, is that 80% of the deaths that we experience in infant mortality are not driven by medical things. They're not driven by like the conversations you have with your doctor's office or what happens in the hospital or what happens in the clinic room like you might expect. They are driven by the social and economic things, the things that I think that, you know, many of us likely take for granted every day when you think about access to high quality health care, when you think about access to high quality education, sustainable, affordable places to live, et cetera. Who is in our community doing that work? You know, who is holding the net closed in the places where it gaps? And those are our nonprofit organizations. They are the ones that are holding the gaps together for us so that our families and our babies are not falling through. And the way that they are doing it is in whatever way is necessary. Whatever way a family comes to me that they need to have their need met is the way I'm going to meet that need. And that is what we know works. That is what happened in Cincinnati. And that is the way that we need to experience funding from our funding partners. When we call it a partnership, we think about the fact that we are locking arms. So a nonprofit to a funding partner, holding the accountability for mothers and babies and birthing people together. The outcomes are ours as a community. They're shared. And so when we experience funding as a passing off of, I've given you the funds, you're responsible to make it happen, that it breaks that partnership. Instead, what we're hoping for is we're saying our funder says, okay, we have the resources, we're holding the resources, you point the hose at where the resources are needed. And that's really the type of partnership that we need, and it's the type of partnership that we know works.
And so obviously the funding comes when we see those outcomes improve or we see any kind of positive change. I know, Jill, in Cincinnati, we've talked about the fact that there are much more positive outcomes there specifically. So what would your message be, I guess, to maybe some of those funders who say we want to see these positive outcomes in order to continue to provide additional funding to continue to provide and see better outcomes, but they want to see it documented. They want to see the proof that it's actually working.
And that's one-sided accountability. It's holding the grantees' feet to the fire. Basically, it's saying that we inherently distrust you when we feel like we need to constantly check in with reports and oversee the process, right? And nonprofit organizations need the freedom and the space and the time and the resources to think differently and try new things. And so when Cincinnati Children's came to BI3 and said, we want to do a pilot project in Avondale. Avondale is a Black neighborhood in the backyard, literally, of Cincinnati Children's. And they had the highest infant mortality rate in the country at 18.9 per 1,000 births. And the data. Everybody wants to start with the data, which is a great place to start, right? The data told us that the #1 cause of infant mortality was preterm birth. So you start to look at preterm birth. And why preterm birth? Well, the data also told us that women weren't getting access to prenatal care in the first 12 weeks. They would find out they were pregnant at 6 weeks, and then they'd call to make an appointment, and they wouldn't get into an appointment until their second trimester. That was a piece of it. But listening to Black women and families themselves was the key to creating a new model of care that put mom and baby at the center and surrounded them with the social supports that they need to have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy birth. Mom wasn't late to her doctor's appointment because she wanted to be. She was late to her doctor's appointment because she had to take 2 buses to get there. And she could arrive 2 hours early, which she can't afford to doc pay for 2 hours, or she arrives 30 minutes late. She cares. She just has obstacles in her way. And so it's recognizing these barriers. And then as you listen to women, you know, why aren't they excited to go to their first prenatal appointment? Because they felt the distrust of the healthcare system. They distrust the healthcare system. You can go back in history and see all of the horrible things we've done to Black people. That's real. Why do they want to go see someone that they don't know, they don't feel comfortable that they're going to receive the quality of care they deserve? And so structural racism, frankly, in healthcare is one of the root causes of our Black infant mortality crisis. And so my advice for other funders is one, take risks, invest in new things. We need new solutions to old problems. It's being flexible with the dollars. So yes, you give a 3-year grant. Great, we want to achieve these outcomes in 3 years. Guess what? COVID arrives on the scenes, and that complicates everything because we can't see people in person, and now we got to shift online. Nobody knows how to provide these services online. And so it's that adaptability. And I think that with traditional philanthropy, if we get so myopic on achieving promised outcomes that we miss opportunities along the way. And so it's really leaning in and trusting and having those conversations. I'd much rather have a conversation than you send me a written report. I don't like to read reports, so I'd much rather sit down with you. Tell me, what are the successes you've achieved? What are the challenges and barriers you're facing? And when we listen to our nonprofits and we listen to those on the ground, we find out from OB-GYNs, moms are losing their Medicaid coverage 60 days after they deliver. Well, I had 2 girls, and I can tell you, I needed health care beyond the 60 days of delivery. And so we partnered with Groundwork Ohio and really advocated to Ohio Medicaid to extend postpartum coverage from 60 days to 1 year. And I'm very proud that the state has turned that on. And now 21,000 moms per year have access to 1 year of coverage after giving birth. But if we had not had that conversation and asked about the challenges and barriers, that may not have come out in a written report. It was that conversation, and we could talk about the barrier, and then we could talk about a solution and what needed to be done to change it. And then thirdly, investing in co-designed solutions. Again, leaning into the experts, which you've heard everyone on this panel say, is people with lived experience are the experts. They know what they need, and they know how to help solve the problems. And so we were very proud to invest in Mama Certified, which is an idea that came from Black women themselves. They said, look, we don't know where to have our baby. We don't have good information to know that we're going to feel safe and we're going to feel heard. I mean, look no further than Serena Williams to see how that pregnancy was horrible and no one listened to her, much less a woman from Avondale. And it's really listening into the experts. And what they said is how wonderful it would be if we had information so we could make the best birthing decision for me and my baby, right? And let's create a badging process, because we don't want to just have a verbal commitment from hospital systems. We want to see badges. We want them to earn badges that say they're improving maternal health, they're improving infant health, they're addressing implicit bias. We want those things to be very visible to us so we can choose a birth hospital. And I never thought I would say this, but all Cincinnati hospitals signed on to share data and work to create a community that is healthier for Black women.
So it's incredible to see that kind of work happening where you are. But for those other organizations, those smaller, medium-sized organizations that currently kind of have their hands tied, they don't have any other choice but to submit these reports. I mean, Easy, we've talked about this even with kind of how there are structures in place. I mean, what is your ideal kind of structure when it comes to reporting?
So let me start a little bit backwards. I've been interested in infant mortality and pregnant. It was my master's thesis 20-something years ago. I was 10 years old when I went to school. And what's really interesting is that we have huge social problems, huge healthcare problems. The very last question on grants is, how are you going to sustain this funding once it goes away? Not, how can we work together so that this problem goes away? So as an organization seeking funding, the other structure is overhead. All these ideas are nice about how to help people. I got to hire people to do it. Talented people to do it. I need talent to do reporting. I need infrastructure to have robust reporting systems. Overhead is about building capacity. And when I don't have enough capacity to do the things that I need to do, then I have reduced impact. I have about 15 to 20 grants that I have to manage, and I am so thankful for the relationship with all of the funders. Some of them require different reporting systems. I'm on a calendar year, some of them are on a fiscal year, some of them end September 30th. I don't even know what year that is, right? I'm spending a lot of administrative time trying to make sure that I run a business. Nonprofits are a business. And Danielle said something that was pretty key about what we're doing. We're essential services. Could you imagine if the police department or the fire department had to worry about writing grants every year? I understand that we can't depend on funders. But if we have these big community problems and we really need to solve them, I want to be a partner aligned in a multi-year plan that allows me to test, try, innovate, fail, forward, and then figure out what the next steps are. But instead, every year I'm trying to figure out how am I going to keep the staff that I just hired. Oh my God, this grant is about to run out. But the staffing thing is really key. We gotta have talent, and I gotta pay them. This notion of community health workers is fantastic, but if they're standing in the same lines as the people that they're serving, how in the world do we expect them to help them solve other people's problems? Those are the things outside of delivering the services that your nonprofits are dealing with. We barely have time to think of strategy because we're stuck in survival. So that's the importance of this trusted partnership, trusted philanthropy. If I'm not doing the job, take the money away. But if I'm doing it, I'm on a hamster wheel every year, every quarter. I turn in reports monthly, quarterly, annually, Tuesday, Friday. And again, I'm grateful for it, but that's time I could be putting towards getting a good staff. Having good talent, it's not a luxury, it's essential. And the work that we do, we're essential. We are essential services. And I say this stuff to Danielle all the time, I want to be somebody's line item. Because I want to partner on solving these. We've been talking about infant mortality for the past 20 years. We've been talking about our other community issues since before I was born. And we're still in the same place. So there has to be some mind shift in philanthropy and funding and thinking about how we can partner to solve a problem and not how we're just going to give funds for a short time benefit and then walk away from it. So I don't know what that is for the funders, but I'm looking for a partnership. I'm willing to do the work because it takes time. It takes mistakes. There's good learning. But we don't have the time sometimes to even report that back to you because we're on this hamster wheel of trying to figure out what funds, what do we have to report next, what fund am I about to lose? And so I love the things that have worked is that we've had good funding relationships with partners that recognize that and had some trust, and they've given us multi-year funding. They've come back and asked us, okay, what are you finding? What could we do better? What could we do better together? That helps us in that structure. Not making me adopt another computer system so that I can report something just for your particular organization that you don't want to pay for. Or giving me 1 year funding to hire somebody that I got to figure out after the funding is gone how to keep them for a problem that we say is big and it's huge and we need to solve it. So to me, those are the structures that hold me accountable. But can we really, really, truly go into a partnership that allows us to flourish and solve the issues or the problems that we say we need to solve in the community?
So, all right, don't go anywhere. I want your thoughts on this. But before we conclude with that, obviously it is CMC's longstanding tradition to take audience questions. So we're going to move our questions from our live stream and in-person audience in just a few minutes. So if you have a question, please make your way over to the microphone now. You can see Doug is waving his hand. And then if you're watching online, we ask that you type your questions into the chat. But again, before we take those questions, I do just want to kind of bring this part of the conversation to a close with some final thoughts. I know Jill, Danielle, you both had things you were like ready to say.
Go ahead, Jen. So I want to start with saying that we have gems in our community like EC. And in your neighbors, folks sitting in this audience, we have a beautiful mix of backgrounds here, folks from all different sorts of organizations, funders, nonprofit organizations, folks who are interested community members. And this message is for each of you in how you engage the nonprofit sector, and in specific, how you engage infant maternal health. When you're looking to provide funding or provide support for an organization, the best place for you to start is learning about the organization and the work that they do, the issues that they face, and becoming an actual partner. So building that actual partnership. The old style of philanthropy that you heard about in the title here, it's about transaction. It's about, I have a thing you need, you ask me in all the ways I want to be asked for this thing. And then once I give it to you, you're still not off the hook, because then you still have to talk to me in all the ways that I want you to talk to me about that thing. That's not a partnership. That's like a really stingy bank, okay? Really stingy. What we're looking for is real relationships and real investment, not just financial, but emotional investment, capacity building investment in this work together. EC, you said it best. One of the things that we know works in infant maternal health and infant mortality is that perinatal supports is what we call it, but it's really like the people that surround a birthing parent. Who are those people? And sometimes folks don't have them. Many times folks don't have enough of them. Those people have to be paid, right? If we know that that is an intervention that works, What we need is to be able to pay the people that can do it. So what we are looking really here today to say, and what I'm hoping to put a fine point on for today, is that we're looking for flexibility in our relationship with you. We're looking to learn together. So you invest in us. We provide to you learnings. We learn together on how to approach this and how to go forward as a unit. And we share in the outcomes together. We succeeded, we learned, because we never failed, but we learned, and we iterate to do it again together.
I think what you led with was doing our own homework. And that's one thing funders can do. We don't have to ask for everything from our nonprofit organizations. Their 990s are out there. So do your own homework. Take the onus off the grantees. I also want to say EC hit on a really important point, which is if you're going after a hard problem, guess what? 1 year, 3 years of funding gets us nowhere. We have been funding work to reduce infant mortality in Cincinnati for over 10 years now. Cradle Cincinnati knows we're committed, and we just developed a new strategic plan, and guess what? Maternal and infant health is still one of our priority areas. Funders get in the way when they change their priority areas every 3 years or 5 years when they do their new strategic plan. Oh, sorry, we're moving on to the next problem because we couldn't solve this one in 3 or 5 years. So we're gonna go over here and try this. Like, it takes commitment. You know, BI3 wants to go after hard problems, and we're all in, and we want to partner, we want to lock arms. And I think another important point to your, that you brought up, EC, is that this unrestricted funding. So it's not just multi-year, it's unrestricted funding. And so BI3 now implements an indirect cost rate to our grants that is 20%, because we know that nonprofits need operational dollars to keep the lights on, to pay the people to do the work. We've even gone to grantees who have submitted an idea to us and said, you're not asking for enough money. Like, we love the work you want to do, but you need to ask for more money. And they're like, what? We're like, yeah, this is an awesome idea, and it's going to take a lot of work, and you're not asking for enough. So it's really being that true partner and being in it for the long haul. If we would have stopped our funding in 3 years, Cincinnati wouldn't have gone from one of the worst infant mortality rates in the country to on par with the national average. That was an aspirational goal 10 years ago. We went from 10.8 to 5.5. In Avondale, that had the highest, 18.9, when we started to look at extreme preterm births, those babies born before 28 weeks, we were able to wrap around moms and make sure that they had the care they needed. And Avondale once was at losing a baby every 26 days. And through our work, within 3 years, they went to 0 for 3 straight years. A preterm birth every 26 days to 0 for 3 straight years. And so then it became, okay, how do we do this in other communities? And so I'm really hoping that the Department of Child and Youth that the governor has set up, they just released a big, bold goal for Ohio, which is to get to 4.4. I think we're at 7 point something right now. And that will take our entire state coming together. We need to look at what's working, what's not working, and in every community, we start by listening. We look at the assets of that community. We listen to the people in that community, because a model that works in one community cannot just be picked up and plopped in another. You have to start by listening.
So we want to take an audience question from Doug.
So much, and thank you to today's panelists. A great conversation. For those of you in the room with us today, I know that you've got questions for today's experts. Please join us up here at the microphone. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. If you're watching online, please type your question into the chat, and I will curate those questions. Great questions at CMC have 2 things in common. They take about 30 seconds or less to ask. And what punctuation mark does a question end in? A question mark. Thank you to our repeat guests. To launch us off, what role does the Affordable Care Act play in your worlds? Are you concerned for its future?
Yes. It's important. Even with the Affordable Care Act, we have people that are still unable to access the resources, the insurance, and things that they need. So think of what we will look like without it. So yes, I am concerned.
I think EC said everything that needs to be said. The Affordable Care Act is really about access to care. And anything that improves that access, even if it's marginal improvements, is better than going the opposite direction. So we need that to stay intact, and we need more, and we need better.
Our next question.
My name is Cole Ramsey. My pronouns are they, them. I'm with Ohio Birth Center. Birth centers are a proven method to not only improve outcomes, save money, but also significantly reduce racial health disparities. There are 2 freestanding birth centers in the state of Ohio who are unable to fully open and serve communities because the hospitals are unwilling to collaborate with those birth centers. One is here in Columbus and one is in Cincinnati. I'm curious, regardless of the funding model, how do we make change when there seems to be so much resistance from the hospitals? And I also say this as a birth doula in Columbus for 20 years.
Are on me. Healthcare systems are challenged in their own right, but they do need to collaborate better. And what I've found with healthcare systems is we agree there's an issue, and then it's easier to go off and do it yourself than partnering with the community. But the reality is that more moms need care. And so at BI3, we just provided funding to set up a partnership with our FQHC in Butler County and our Bethesda Hospital in Butler County because we know that more moms need access to care. So I think funders can help build some of those relationships with hospitals, especially if the funders have good relationships with the hospitals. I don't have all the answers for you, but it needs to be done.
I wanted to add to that and just say that partnerships are a huge part of that. You know, having the making and cultivating the best possible partnerships across the area in which you're looking to serve is incredibly important. And the second piece of that, which is also chronically underfunded for nonprofits, is advocacy. So, you know, part of what you mentioned is a requirement for a statewide reform in how birthing centers operate, and that takes work. So our nonprofits who are boots on the ground serving families every single day are also expected to then, you know, pack up and schlep over to the State House and, you know, figure out how to provide advocacy that way on the same budget that we've provided to them to just kind of do the bare minimum of service.
Live audience question.
Thank you. Yes. Nancy Nanny watching on the live stream audience asks, how is help provided for a birthing parent's spouse or partner?
So I think each family is unique. When a mother comes to us, we do a pretty thorough assessment that includes learning about that family. It is essential that a spouse is involved with that process. Many a times when we assist a birthing mother, we find that they have other children, and they're also lacking other resources. And so what our staffs are doing is we might start with that mom and connecting her to prenatal resources, but it ends up being a relationship with that family, and it turns into maybe a family-centered approach that we're looking at, and then we're building goals. We need to get the kids registered for school, or I need to partner with a group like Future Readiness to get their other kids ready for kindergarten, or I need to help them fill out an application for Medicaid, or I need to make sure that the baby, once they're born, gets their well visits. Maybe dad is in between jobs. I can work to help dad to find a job. So we do support the entire family if that is necessary because it's important.
Yeah.
So we also think about, as I shared earlier, one of the protective factors in pregnancy is the supports across the birthing person's life. So the partner, I don't think about them as like, you know, always a romantic partner. All families look different. So it could be any sort of support person. They are a part of the team. In fact, in Cleveland, there is a model that's being advanced around team-based care with the birthing person at the center, driving those decisions, asking those questions, being responded to, and the family as a part of that response. So all of that to say is that there should never be, in best practices, a separation between the birthing person and their support people. They are a unit.
Thank you. We have about 6 minutes left, and I think 4 more questions. So we'll try to speed through these.
And my question might be a big one. Caitlin Foss, grateful to be in a room of such passionate people. We talked about structural racism, and we talked about the patriarchy, and we've really focused on dollars today, and I'm with you, more dollars. What do you think about late-stage capitalism and kind of the dismantling of some of that system and involving mutual aid, and where do you see those efforts working?
I can go first. So that's a really big question, and there are so many pieces to it. You asked a question that I feel is, it is a long game question around capitalism and how we fix its issues and how we make it work for others. And in the midst of that journey, we have people dying. And so we have to pair the desire to get to that late stage, you know, that to fix that problem with the journey that we're currently on. You also mentioned mutual aid, which I think is one strategy that we can use to mitigate that. Mutual aid is essentially the gist of like, I'm in the predicament you're in, I have a shared experience you have, I meet your needs, you meet mine in a shared experience. I hope that was a bumpy summary, but that's the gist, and I'm trying to move fast. But we have so much work to do in the interim, right? So as we are working on fixing the systems that we are currently in, we also have to save the people whose lives are at risk along the way. So I can appreciate that the U.S. largely has operated within multiple broken systems, and that there are many people that have not benefited from them. And as we're on that journey to that acknowledgement, we have to save some lives.
Danielle, I just want to say, and I think we're good enough friends that I'm not going to contradict you, but I do want to make this point. These systems are not broken. They're working exactly the way they were designed. And so our work is to create systems change. So you have to start from late stage capitalism, whatever. Start with the system was created wrong, it didn't ask enough people, and how do we just create a new one and fund it? So I don't, you know,
I don't think that's a contradiction at all.
Right, okay.
I am in mission mode about making sure we're saving lives, and we know that what we're doing isn't working. What we currently
it never
have
did.
isn't working.
Yeah, it never did. That's the hard part, folks. Let's just admit that, okay?
Our next question. Yes, thank you. My name is Ebony Wilson, and I'm the program director at Mental Health America of Ohio. Poem, Perinatal Outreach and Encouragement for Moms. Fabulous job on the panel. I am also part of those statistics in which you all have reported today, giving birth to a 23-weeker micro-preemie whom is alive today and doing well. However, I stand behind what we're here discussing today, and it's very impactful and important to move the dial forward and come together as we are. So that being said, most agree that mental health is a complicated challenge and impacts maternal and child health outcomes, yet is often left out of the conversation. How can we not only shift the funding conversation broadly, but lift up programs like ours and Poem that leverage lived experience, myself and others, to begin to address mental and emotional health?
So what I heard you saying, I think, falls in line with a lot of what we talked about today. You're an organization who is serving people, critical needs. Maternal mental health is critically important, and it cannot be understated. It falls right in line with the other social determinants. Do we have stable housing? Do we have access to care? It's high up there on the list. I'm being told to be very quick. Okay, it's high up there on the list, and what you need, I'm making the assumption, is flexibility in funding. So you need to be able to react to the thing that's in front of you and move in the direction of what that client needs you to move in, and funders have to be along for the ride.
I love poem.
Good afternoon. My name's Sophia Pfiffner. I'm the CEO of the Columbus Metropolitan Club. Thank you, all of you, for being here today, both in the room, virtually, and as part of our panel. One of the questions that I had while listening to today's conversation is this word funders. When I hear that word, I worry that many people think of private foundations, 20% of philanthropic funds, corporate foundations, 7% of philanthropic funds, but not individual action towards this issue. So my question to the panel is, how are you defining funders, and what can individuals who are in this room and watching do to support the funding needs of birthing parents?
Well, thank you, Sophia. The one thing that I would say, and I thought about this, it took a lot of vulnerability to realize, as a funder who's also a fundraiser, we give $20,000 grants. And I had to realize that's nothing. It's nothing for what the people actually need that are applying for this money, but it's better than nothing, especially for people who are just starting out. So we all, as donors, also have to think about the fact, if you donate $25, and it may be a lot to you, still imagine where your $25 lands in their overall work. So we also see that where somebody will say, I gave $25, I don't know what they did with it. Imagine your own household budget. Imagine anything. Don't do that to them. Because even as a foundation, we have to explain what that $20,000 did, and I know it was nothing compared to what could have happened. And yet you'll see millions of dollars move in this country, and people will still say they need more. So I would just say, as you're thinking about yourself, I thought about this earlier, and I agree with you, we're all funders. It's not just the government, it's just not a foundation like ours. The only way we change this is if every single one of us sees ourselves as a funder for the things that we care about, and that we all trust in the way that BI3 trusts when we give that money. Even though it's very important dollars to us, I always say, when that shoe breaks after two times of wearing it, do you never buy that shoe again? I bet you do. You go back to that company, you go back to Target, even though you bought one piece of something that didn't work out. We don't cut them off. We cut off philanthropy the minute that we don't see everything we ever wanted as individuals, let alone as larger funders. So we have to break the cycle as individuals.
All right, I wish we had more time. I really do, but unfortunately we're getting the wrap signal, so I'm gonna turn it over to Ellen Block now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope you all found today's conversation enlightening, and that you're all leaving here with some questions for yourself about how you're going to adopt trust-based philanthropy in your own personal giving and in talking about it within your communities. We would like to once again thank the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center for sponsoring today's forum. Thank you to the Vue Columbus for hosting us today, and to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's live stream. And our very special appreciation to today's passionate panelists, E.C. Green, Kelley Griesmer, Jill Miller, Danielle Tong, and our host, Jennifer Bullock. Please join us here at the Vue next Wednesday for a special happy hour forum as we head into the election. We'll host a terrific panel as we ask, are LGBTQ+ rights losing ground? Thank you again, everyone. We could not do this without you. Have a great afternoon.